let's see. Look at its my ways at its very simplest. My view of product management is there's really two categories of things that you have to do as a product manager. The first is you have to figure out what to build. Okay, and then the second is can you get it built? And so every skill that you need for product management, um, I believe, just falls in this framework. Figuring out what to build is where your ability to look at customer data, look at competition, look at their needs, crafting a roadmap, a vision. That's all part of like, can you as a product manager, as a product leader, figure out what to build? And getting it built is really about, hey, can you make the right set of trade-offs? Can you work with engineering and other functions? Can you manage a schedule? Can you keep the team culture in the right place? Do you understand what metrics to focus on versus not? That's all about like execution, right? So can you figure out what to build and can you get it built? Look, I believe in your early part of your career, you really, as a product manager, when you're new and inexperienced, you really start first to do what I call as can you get it built? You never start a product management career um, by coming in and shaping a broad vision, broad strategy, because you just don't have the experience and the context. And it's very true for me as well. When I started out, I had one small feature in a big product space that I really had to figure out how to get built. How do I write a spec for that? How do I think about that? How do I work with engineering? And that's typically where everyone's early product journey starts. And as you grow in your career and in your experience, your balance starts to tilt towards, are you the person who's figuring out what to do next? Right. And even that can change with like the scope, because if you look at a CEO of a company, of my company, Mark, he's thinking about not just what we should build, he's thinking about where the world and the industry is heading in the next 3 to 5 years. What is the trends that Facebook needs to bet on and invest in? Whereas my role might be more about my own product, newsfeed. Where does it need to be? What are the set of things we need to invest in and do? So that's where I spend the majority of my time. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but I really wanted to lay that framework out because I think there's a mix of folks here with different experiences, but that's typically how I see a product journey shape up. You start a lot with execution, you move towards strategy and vision, and that also has varying degrees of scope and how expansive you have to be in your thinking based on how senior you get. So really, that's how I started. That's how most of us, if you're early on, you'll start and you'll graduate. What advice do I have? Let's see. I think this I would actually even take those questions separately. I think there's a breaking into product management, which is I think slightly different, and then there's how to be an exceptional product manager. So let me give you kind of my sense, and this is probably a longer conversation, but I'll try to be brief and give you some like high level thoughts. And if people have more questions, we can go dig in. Look, breaking into product management, I know is a bit challenging in a sense that for them, there are roles that you can start straight out of graduation, straight out of college, school, which are early. Those roles are not as common. There's a far and few in between. And some of the programs we talk about, like the RPM or APM program, at least at companies like Google and Facebook, um, they just don't have that many applicants that we can take. And so I think it is challenging. But I think that's one route, which is you graduate and you apply to early product roles and start your journey. Start by learning how to execute and then move up the value chain, so to speak, to then go figure out what you should build. Okay, so that's kind of breaking into product management. Now, if you are not fresh out of school and you're like mid stage, you have 5 to 6 years of experience, 7 years experience, I think it starts to get more challenging because now you have the experience. So you don't want to go to super early product roles, but you'll encounter this thing where companies would want uh, people with prior product manager experience. So you're kind of in like this catch 22, how do you get the experience till you become a product manager? So I think what I have seen work well is, if you're coming from another discipline, is to try and be a product manager in your current company. I think your odds of making that transition are a lot higher, because you probably know the people, know the work, have more context, and figuring out how to switch there, in my opinion, is easier than trying to both change your role from engineering to product or data to product and change your company. So it's a two-step, it's a bigger leap. So I always advise people, if there is a product role in your current company, try to do that and then move to another company. So that's about breaking into product management. How to be a great product manager? Oh my God, like we can spend hours on this. I don't think there's one answer. I think the thing that has personally stood out, that has helped me, is more than anything else. And there's a lot of skills, and I talk about this on LinkedIn every once in a while in post, but um, just being super curious. Um, and it sounds very cliched, but it's actually not. I think it's one of the most important things. And what I mean by that is, are you the type of person who installs a new app and uses it, and you have this almost curiosity about what is it in this product that's working, what's not working, why did they choose these kind of things, why is their brand a certain way, you know, and being curious and trying, and just like trying to get better at both your understanding and intuition is like the most important thing. Like being hungry for just learning, um, because a lot of things stem from that. Your ability to absorb from more successful product people, better case studies, failures. When you're open and you're just always in that mindset that I want to be a better product person and how do I sharpen my skills. Personally, to me, that has been super helpful, because that always like keeps me hungry to learn more. It's not just about product; it's about how I manage people. It's how about how I speak, how I write. I mean, all of those things. I'm just continuously trying to get better. So anyway, that would be my one advice. Try and see if you can make a shift within your company. That would be my first starting point. I think one of the challenges we always have is, um, and I'll speak for myself as a hiring manager, as a person who goes and recruits a lot, right? Is there are certain roles that do require product management experience. We don't just say it for the sake of it, because maybe they're more evolved. There's a larger teams you have to work with, and it becomes really difficult to assess you on both your raw potential and product management skills and bring you to a new company. So as I said, try and be a product manager within your own company first. Spend time, learn the craft there for a couple of years before you want to make a change. I see that as the best path. Yeah. Um, Let me tackle the second one first. If it's tough within your company, look for um, adjacent companies, like companies who are closest mirror to what your company or what your skill set is. I think there's art. So what I mean by that is, I think some gentleman had a question earlier about they're working on a semiconductor company. So like, are there other players in that field, that you could get a product role? I would start there, as opposed to, you know, you're an engineer in an enterprise company and you want to become a product manager in a consumer big tech. I think that's a huge leap. The way I would transition is like, find product roles in the space you are in, build that out, and then transition into consumer. So do it in like a couple of steps. That's my advice. Um, Look, I think in some ways the reason it's perceived as like FAANGM, that's the word. FAANGM companies, it's tougher to get in, is um, simply because there's like a lot more applicants than roles, and so um, I think preparing for, let's say, you are interviewing and exploring product roles, um, it's no different whether it's a large big tech company or a promising startup. I mean, I think the set of skills and set of questions you'll get asked is probably the same. So I don't think there's like a massive distinction. It's just that there are fewer roles, it's tougher to get in. And so That's why people index on how to get into FAANG companies. I don't think it's because they ask you something different. It's just that there's just so many people and it's just a little bit more competitive. Yeah, I mean, if you want me to cover how we rank feed, that's probably a long conversation. Puneet, I'll give you a short answer and I'll encourage you to look at some of the resources. And we've published how newsfeed works, how newsfeed ranking works. If you were to just search for these, there's pretty detailed post from my team about how we rank things. Look, at a high level, um, it's very personalized, right? It is about what kind of content you want to see, who your friends are, who we think your closer friends are, and how do we distinguish between acquaintances versus close friends, the pages that you might follow or profiles that might you follow, the groups that you're part of. All of that feeds into and there's like many signals that we look at, how you engage, how you share, all the features that we have on Facebook. And we try to do our best guess about the ranking and providing, like, at a high level, we give scores based on all the signals we have to all the content that is generated. And based on what we think is going to be most valuable to you, we put it at the top spot and so on and so forth, right? So that's kind of like the ranking at a conceptual level, how it works. Now, what those signals are and how we're constantly tuning, that's a lot more involved. And so you can find some of that material online to just see. I mean, it's a little bit of a combination. I always find it fascinating. People have very just like A or B kind of questions and expect answers about some of these things that are a little bit more subjective. I'll tell you how I think about it. Um, First, you want to definitely pick a space that's growing in terms of market, in terms of opportunity. And once you figure out what that space needs to be, then be very picky about the kind of people you work with and the culture of the company. Because um, if that is right, then it doesn't matter how well their product is doing or not. A good culture with a good set of people will figure out how to make it work. So that's kind of the mnemonic. But I also don't want you to think that that's the only thing to pick. You can work for a great manager in a solid company, which is growing so slowly, which is in a space that's so like saturated that it's not going to do your career really, really good. So I don't want you to think that it's just like there's this like advice about pick people, pick your manager. Well, in combination with make sure it's a space that's exciting and that's growing, because you could work for a great manager, but if both of you are on a really slow path, then that's not helpful either. This will be a big part of your job, especially at more senior levels, because there's a lot more opinions and a lot more folks. Um, I think there's two aspects of stakeholder management, and again, this is one of those topics that I could talk on for ends. But to cover it at a very top level, one is making sure that there's like extreme alignment um, in your company or set of stakeholders, and there could be different functions. It could be marketing versus engineering, whatever your context is, that you're all talking about the same set of goals as a unit, as an organization, as a company. If you're misaligned, where you as a product team are trying to incubate a new functionality, your sales team is indexed on hitting their numbers and just like spending a lot of times in the sales cycle of an old functionality, like things like that. If you're misaligned, then there's nothing you can do to manage those stakeholders. It's always going to end up badly. So extreme alignment is important. I think the second thing is building trust. I think you as a PM are really um, have to spend a lot more time in building trust and relationships with a lot of these stakeholders, more so than your peers in engineering might have to do or have time to do. And I think building trust before you are in situations where you're disagreeing, where you have to disagree and commit, I think is really, really important. And so I think spend time doing that. what are the main things we look for in the interviews? Um, look, are you able to both uh, be at a high level and also go deeper into details? And can you navigate that? I see candidates stuck on one of the two spectrums. That's number one. I think I posted about this on LinkedIn once, but number one mistake I see candidates make. And what I mean by that is they'll answer at a super high strategy level without going into how are they going to build something, how are they going to make trade-offs, or they'll start very specific trade-offs and how they're going to build without actually thinking through, is it the right problem or not? So if I were to leave you with one tip in product management interviews, is to make sure, if you think of it as a plane, make sure you can start at 30,000 feet and you can land it at the airport that's needed. So you should be able to cover the altitude of here's the here's the problem, how I'm going to deal with it, the strategy, why it can win in the marketplace, and then go into details and understand what the interviewer is looking for. And if you don't, then ask, like which altitude you should be at. Most often, if interviews are looking for how will you strategically this solve it, and you start building like UI features, it's going to be a mismatch. So focus on the altitude and the answers. I do get asked this question a lot, by the way. It's like the number one question I get asked on a weekly basis when I'm talking to candidates or interviewing. People always like to ask me, how is it different between Google and Facebook? And sometimes I ask people, why do you have offer from both Google and Facebook? They're like, no, 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 I'm just curious. And so I always find it fascinating that people want to know the difference between these companies. Okay, so a lot of it is very similar in terms of product management. I think both companies have a very similar style. They're very consumer focused company. There are a lot of cultural company cultural attributes that are very similar. They're incredibly open companies. They tend to be matrixed in how you get things done and who you work with. So I would say there's a quite a bit of overlap between the two things. I do think the one difference is like Facebook tends to operate a lot faster um, in terms of how quickly we build products, how we quickly we try experiments, um, and not as it's not about just launching and building products. Even in decision making, even in deciding to stop something or pivot away from something, I do think that Facebook tends to operate a lot faster. It's also a lot more metrics and data focused than my experience at Google was. Those would be the two standout differences, but I would say overall, there's a lot of overlap in how what product skills, and how it's done in both companies. You know, if you're like in engineering, um, there's a saying that read great code to write great code. Like a lot of times, the way you learn how to write great code, uh, and it's funny in engineering we promote this a lot more, which is use code snippets that already exist that are highly performant that have been written well by really senior engineers and learn from that and adopt that and do that. I think that's one thing is we don't do enough product. I think every product manager I've seen a tendency to think like they're the first ones to solve it in a unique way. Um, as a discipline, I think product management is getting a lot more mature. And so there's things that people have done before you or have done in a way that I think just use that um, to learn. And so just like mimicking good habits, good practices, good ways of doing product is one. The second is be curious. I mean, I think like I'll give you some like candid thoughts. I meet a lot of people who I mentor who want to get into product management, who start preparing for the interviews, which is all great. You have to do that. But that's the only time I see them thinking about vision and strategy and why is this design choice made? Because they just like preparing for their interview. If you want to be an exceptional product manager, you have to live like that. Like you have to think. You everything for me is like a product, and there's questions embedded in it. I downloaded this app called Hotels Tonight. It gives you last minute hotel deals, and you know if if you're a designer, you probably look at that app and like, hey, this UI is it good or bad in these aspects. You start to analyze it. Um, as if you are a product person, you should be doing the same thing about product. My first question was, oh my God, they've chosen a name that's going to inhibit them from expanding. Because now you associate hotels tonight with last minute deals, and if they want to become a vacation hotel finder, it's going to be tough. And so the point I'm trying to make is the way to get good at it is just like constantly think of it that way and practice it and learn every product, everything you pick up or buy has things that you can analyze, and like that'll help you own your skills. There's two ways to answer this. First of all, you don't need to do MBA to grow your product management skill set. Um, the way to grow your product management skills is to by building products. That's the best way to learn. And if you were to ask me, my if you work at a very early startup, or if you were to start something of your own, or if you are working in a hyper growth place, if you spend 2 years in that kind of environment, I think you're going to learn a lot more because you're going to have, rapid development. You're going to fail fast, or you're going to scale fast. Either one of those, you learn a lot more from spending those 2 years that way than doing an MBA. If that's your goal, if your goal is to be a better product manager, I do think you become a better product manager by building more products and doing it in a faster fashion. Now, you can do MBA for different motivations. If there are you feel like you want to switch your career, you need something more of a stronger brand on your resume. Education never goes waste. So you learn things in MBA that that'll help you. I've done an MBA too from Berkeley. Um, and you learn stuff, right? Like I learned about, some of my favorite courses were in accounting and venture finance and, all of those things that I always felt like I could read and understand as well. And just like that helps. So education will help you in numerous ways over your career. But again, this is like, I find everything to be in life to be like a product management question, but be clear about what your goals are, right? If you want to do an MBA for the goals of getting a better education, filling in knowledge gaps, getting a good brand, switching your career, meeting people with whom you can build a network, then that's great. Don't do MBA to be a better product manager. Do Because to be a better product manager, there's better ways to practice that than doing an MBA. So I would say like I'm not going to answer for you whether you should do an MBA or not. I just want you to think more clearly about what your goal out of doing spending 2 years is. So I would say it matters a lot more in the early stages, like early careers, early PM roles. So definitely it makes a big difference if you have um, a degree from a reputable institute. You know, it starts to matter less as you get more work experience because you know that it's the most recent thing that matters the most when you're interviewing for a job, right? Let's say somebody has a 15-year experience and career and product, and I'm talking to them, I'm going to be most curious about really their last 5 experiences. So it's going to matter less where they graduated from. But when I talk to APM candidates, yes, because they just gotten out of school, it does matter what they've done. So I think that's how I would think about that. Um, I can't think of anybody who says, okay, first of all, it's a great question, but it's a question you should always ask throughout your career. If anyone at any point says, I know everything about product management and I don't have any gaps, then that would be dishonest, right? And that would also make you less open to learning new things. So I also have a lot of gaps. So and I'm sure, across the spectrum of experience, people have different gaps. So it's not unique to you. It's something that we should all aspire to always look at. Um, as far as your question is concerned, I mean, I think you have to be specific about what is it gaps that you have, and how to plug those. Um, one way to think about this is one of the ways I ask folks early on in their career to approach is try to get a diversity of experience in your early product career, um, so that you get a very well-rounded kind of set of skills. Diversity, what I mean by that is, you know, work at an early stage startup, like super early, where you don't even have product market fit. You're trying to figure out, which approach is going to work. Work at a scale startup where you have great product market fit, but you're just like growing and scaling, and your team is doubling, your product is doubling, your revenue, and then work at a very scaled company, a big product. If you in an ideal world, if you were to do a couple of years in each of these phases, or at least two of these kind of flavors of things, it'll help you learn very different set of skills that are going to be very handy as you become a product leader, right? Because early stage you realize how to move fast, like how do you think about product market fit, how do you do less, as I said, to have a better impact. At a very scaled company, you learn how to work in a large team, how to set up processes in a large team, how to innovate at scale, which comes with its own challenges. So there's a set of things you learn, and the best way to kind of try and round out your experience is to try to do a diversity of these things at your early stage. It starts to get tougher as you get more senior to make these shifts, but now I would say there's so much happening in our industry that it's no longer, I would say, an issue. But if you do it early in your career, I think it really, really helps you get a broad understanding of how product should work across different stages of its life cycle. Well, I would say, I think the biggest thing you learn in the consumer space, and I think the thing that is changing here is like interacting with the consumers directly. Um, Look, consumers make decisions pretty rapidly about your app, your product, your service, your experience. And all of us are consumers, and we do this all the time. You install an app and you see if it's valuable, you get rid of it, you try some site. If it doesn't, work the way you expect it to, you don't go back. We are, as consumers, very quick to both like and dislike things, which is very atypical when you work in enterprise and business space. You can go and pitch to a enterprise CIO and his or her organization about, here's why we built the product, here's our roadmap, here's how you should use it, right? There's a lot more context you can provide, there's a lot more hand holding you can do, partnerships where you're B2B, you can have, tell us what is missing, we'll go work on that, let's sign this deal. None of that happens in consumer. And so your out of box experience, your first experience, the clarity of your product, the clarity of what it's trying to do, those things matter a lot more. And that's the thing you have to learn and master. And it's not easy, but I think it's just a different way of approaching every pixel that you build, so to speak. Consumers are very less forgiving when it comes to what you build than, they're very demanding. So I think it's a challenge. Um, I think letting go is like probably the first biggest challenge that happens, no matter which kind of phase you are in. Um, First time manager of a small team, for first time lead of a small team, all the way, let's say you become a manager of managers or even more. And I don't know what situation you are in, but I think every step of the way, just letting go of things. When I say letting go, is like being comfortable with delegating, being comfortable with obsoleting your own job, which is a huge part of what leadership is. Best, as they say, best test of leadership is you build an organization and culture where even if you were gone, that it would still work to the same degree. Those things are tough, right? Those things are tough because what got you to that spot is your ability to dive in and solve a problem and really understand it. And what gets you to the next level of leadership is your ability to not solve it yourself, find the right people, your ability to delegate, your ability to empower folks, let them fail. All of these things are almost counterintuitive to what made you successful in the first place, as an IC. So I think that's like the biggest thing to learn and be comfortable with and be intentional about is letting others succeed and empower them. Um, the hardest thing is the amount of scrutiny we are always under, and um, rightly so. I think what we do matters to a lot of people. Um, Sometimes we get things wrong, and that also has impact to people and community and like society at large. So I think the toughest part and the most inspiring part actually happens to be the same, which is at Facebook, what a collection of teams do can have an impact like beyond like the wildest dreams. Like I just it's tough to comprehend like how many people use what we build and what we do. So I think mistakes get amplified, good stuff gets amplified, and I think that is probably the toughest part about Facebook. It's less organizational innovation. I mean, I think all of those things. There's always a flavor of things that every company has to get right. But I do find that additional kind of level of scrutiny sometimes obviously very inspiring, but there are days when you find it like really difficult because it doesn't give you room to build things in a quicker way. So yeah, I think I would say that's probably the most challenging thing.